I think it's fair to say that if you've watched my videos before, you can probably assume that I've watched anime, at least to some extent. Obviously, I've watched the big ones like Dragon Ball, Fullmetal Alchemist, Demon Slayer. Okay, I may not be the most in-depth anime fan to grace the internet, but I do like me some anime, which is why I find it so surprising that I never really got around into watching the big three just until last year. The first one I read was One Piece, and in case you can't tell, I have to say that it is not only my favorite so far out of the big three, but also just my favorite manga, period. What I find so surprising about Naruto is that I've done pretty much everything but fucking watch the damn show. I could probably end up watching Boruto before I end up watching Naruto, don't test me on this. These two are basically the most popular. I mean, these are the ones that people are always talking about, and it's always these two that have the most annoying fans.
I declare myself guilty.
But the big three isn't just these two, if you couldn't tell by the fucking name, as there is another one, despite being on the big three, kind of feels like it's in its own lane. And obviously that one would be Bleach. I read Bleach recently during class because I was bored out of my fucking mind, and I think I must have been extremely bored because I finished the series in like 2 weeks, and the series isn't short, it's 686 chapters. The second part of the Bleach 1000-Year Blood War anime adaptation is coming out soon, so as the good wannabe YouTuber that I am, I thought that this was the perfect opportunity to cash in on the hype and make a retrospective on Bleach. Is it even a retrospective if I only read it for the first time a couple months ago? Probably not, but that won't stop me!
Clickbaiting isn't a hobby. It's a lifestyle. Oh, and spoilers by the way. I'm not gonna be retelling everything that happens like one to one. However, I will be showing a lot of scenes that happen in the manga that haven't been shown in the anime just yet.
This arc is weird. For the main introduction to the series, the Subset to Shinigami arc feels very different in storytelling than the rest of the series. A controversial decision, I assume. Ichigo is a teenager that can see spirits and interact with them. Most of his family can actually see them as well. It's just that they see blurry shapes while his father just can't see for shit. Anyways, apart from that one fun fact, Ichigo's life is pretty much normal, you know, just what you would expect, until he meets with a Soul Reaper called Rukia in the middle of a mission to exterminate a Hollow, monsters that result from human souls that had regrets at their time of death and become bound to the living world. Because of Ichigo though, Rukia becomes blindsided by the Hollow, and to help her exterminate it, he agrees to take part of her powers to defeat the Hollow. Only one problem. He takes a bit too much. He takes all of it. Is Ichigo the type of friend to ask for a sip and then drinks the entire fucking bottle? Anyways, this is pretty much the setup for the arc. From here on, the arc mainly just consists of Ichigo and Rukia solving different issues with hollows around the area with the occasional help from his other friends. But for the large majority of this arc, there really isn't an overarching story until like halfway through the arc. Even when compared to the other members of the big three, Bleach still feels like an outlier. Naruto and One Piece, while having less complex stories during the beginning of their shows, would still have an overarching story, which makes Bleach's first arc stand out all the more. In some chapters you will see many cool moments like Ichigo fighting against the Hollow that killed his mom, or meeting with the last remaining member of those who were once rivals of the Soul Reapers, but in other chapters you get the fucking weird magician dude. For the first, I wanna say 30 to 40 chapters of the series, it feels episodic in nature, and it definitely doesn't help that the anime is already infamous with its filler. When I first tried to watch the series in like 2016, I stopped watching because I thought to myself, damn, this shit already putting filler and we ain't even on episode 50! The modern anime community is much less tolerant to animes that take their time between different big plot points, so it's not surprising that I see many people claiming that you don't miss out on anything by skipping straight to the Soul Society arc, and the Substitute Shinigami arc is nothing more than filler. And when I first read the arc, while not completely agreeing with the take, I didn't completely disagree either. I am a person that prefers when a story is constantly moving compared to something more episodic. The reason of why I would rather watch something like Death Note than something like Cowboy Bebop, to give an example. The thing is, I feel like when it comes to Bleach, this episodic approach is a genius writing decision by Tite Kubo. Tite Kubo? How do you say his name? To fully be able to explain what I mean, let me give an example. Amphibia.
Makes sense.
Amphibia is also another episodic show by nature, and similarly to the complaints that Bleach received during its first arc, many have also recommended to skip straight to the end of season 1 to get the story started. But what Amphibia does very well is that during the first season, it builds up the relationship between Anne and the people living in and the people living in Wartwood, making it so that when the end of Season 1 comes around, the scenes in which the villagers come together to help Anne serve as payoff for everything that happened before.
Actually, I don't think I needed the Funny Frog Show to make this point.
Bleach does something similar. Throughout the arc, it builds up many different plot points that will come back up in the future, but what it does the best is simply making you acquainted with the main cast. Bleach is incredibly good in showing off a character and having very strong character moments. I would argue in some cases better than the other manga from its time and even today. I cared about Ichigo, Orihime, Chad, Rukia, and all the others because the manga showed me who they were, how they acted. It showed me that they were friends, which is what makes the end of this arc and the beginning of the next one so effective. As the arc that would serve as the beginning of the series, I think that it does a masterful job and serves as a very good introduction. The Soul Society arc is often regarded as the best arc in Bleach, and honestly, it's pretty good. Rukia has been taken back to the Soul Society for her execution, and after Ichigo gets his ass beat, he needs to hurry it up before Rukia gets terminated. After the small training arc with Kisuke Urahara, Ichigo, Chad, Orihime, and Uri all make their way into the Soul Society, and from here we get to see some very cool world building. After they meet with certain characters, we make our way into the actual Soul Society itself. The characters split up, and from here many shenanigans happen. The Soul Society arc is clean and concise, and I like it quite a lot, and also shows one of my favorite aspects when it comes to Ichigo. Unlike other protagonists, rarely are his power-ups exclusively from they are from training, but it's not just physical training, it's like mental training. While he does train physically, the way in which he is able to unlock most of his powers comes from him accepting different parts of himself, listening to and understanding his allies like Sangetsu, which will become pretty huge plot points later on in the story. This development, to me, makes watching Ichigo very entertaining as he develops as a character more than developing brute force to beat his enemies. I also found the many characters in the Soul Society to be very entertaining, with the internal conflict giving the story a little bit of spice. The story is constantly moving, characters are changing sides at a whim, and the entire situation devolves into chaos, which makes this some of the most entertaining action in any shonen. And the mysteries that are set up and paid off elevate the arc to top tier levels. The arc had a very good balance between the story and the fights being told. There's not an overabundance of fights, and the fights that are here are actually important and not there for padding the arc out like 200 chapters, but unfortunately some people didn't get the memo.
Oh, I'll get there, alright.
I don't have a lot of words to say for the Soul Society arc because really, you already know that the arc is amazing. The characters are all likable and memorable, the conflict is intriguing, the character moments are spectacular, and the fights are honestly incredible. The final fight between Ichigo and Byakuya is great, and Ichigo becoming sort of like a hollow was a crazy moment that will be developed to later on in the following arcs. But what's definitely crazier than that was the ending to this arc. Aizen just coming in out of nowhere and taking the spotlight like he did, essentially hijacking the arc at the finish line, immediately puts him up there as one of the best villains in manga history, especially when he was essentially considered dead throughout the latter half of the arc. There was an ongoing mystery about who murdered Aizen, what happened to him, and it starts many internal conflicts between the many captains of the Gotei 13, and then some people turn to our side, some people turn to the other side. So good. So good. I could probably make an entire video about why Aizen is such a good villain, because he is one of the greatest aspects of Bleach, and I can almost confidently say that a lot of the greater aspects of the following arcs are precisely because Aizen is there. Without him as a villain, the show would be way worse, and I mean, that just goes to show that Kubo knows how to make a villain. I gotta respect him for that at least. Overall, the Soul Society arc is probably the best arc in Bleach, if only because the next arcs will find a way to blunder the #1 spot in hilarious ways. I am very mixed on the Arrancar arc, because what starts out as the greatest arc and ends as the greatest arc in the series has one of, if not the worst second act in the entire fucking show. In this arc, we are introduced to the Arrancars, which are hollows that gain Soul Reaper powers by tearing off their mask, which are mirrored by the Bizards, which are Soul Reapers that gain hollow powers by gaining a mask. This arc immediately starts out with a bang, introducing new characters and plot points and gets right to the point and only presses us on the gas from here on now. The introduction of the espadas in Hueco Mundo. I'm noticing a pattern of Spanish words here. What's up with that? Am I gonna find Hueco Mundo if I go to Barcelona? The conflict immediately rises up when Soul Reapers are struggling to keep up against the espadas and when Orihime is kidnapped, which forces our squad to go to Hueco Mundo to try and rescue her, and when the squad has Ichigo, Uryu, and the most unfortunate wins to loses ratio, then I can't say that it's gonna end well. I think that when it comes to the story, this is definitely one of the top tier Bleach arcs. The amount of revelations and foreshadowing to later events, I don't think that I can talk about this arc without talking about Aizen. Just a bit. Aizen is one of the best villains in anime, and I know that there are some other masterminds like him, alright? I'll read Monster one day, but for today I gotta talk about the man, the myth, the legend. Barely do you see a villain that is so goddamn dominant in an anime, and Aizen is exactly just that. This man was soloing like 5 different captains and people near that level at the same time, while barely trying, while not even using his Bankai. This man was a walking cheat code, I swear. He's literally when kids play fight and one of them uses the infinite Super Saiyan 40,573 Kamehameha times infinity and the other responds with Nah. His win condition was for people to look at his fucking sword. That is ridiculous. Ichigo throughout the majority of the arc was in Hueco Mundo, and that somehow was part of Aizen's plan. Well, he beat the 13 captains, you can't even make this up. Bro was playing chess before the heroes even managed to set up the fucking board. What's even crazier is that when he does join the main show, this man Aizen keeps toying with them. One of the most memorable scenes in all of Bleach was when, in this very same fight, the characters finally look like they have the upper hand against him, and they manage to get a good hit on him. And then we see Ichigo shocked, and we, as the audience, feel the exact same way. But then Ichigo starts yelling. And then when one of the Bizards asks, Aizen, cool as a cucumber, responds with, ならばこちらも聞こう。一体いつから強化水月を使っていないと錯覚していた。
Gotta turn the AC up, he's too cold!
Aizen is one of the most terrifying villains you will ever see because he quite literally had everything planned up to the last atom. And whether he's bluffing or not doesn't matter because he's terrifying enough to where you can believe him. And that is when you know that this man is a fantastic villain, and easily the best villain in any shonen manga. I don't want to hear anything about Madara, I don't want to hear anything about Doflamingo, I don't want to hear anything about Don Krieg. He's such a good villain that the Arrancar Arc will be the best arc if we are talking exclusively about the villains. He carries this arc so hard that you kind of forget that the arc kind of drags. The Arrancar Arc has so many good moments. Ichigo's character development was insane, and the good moments from the arc I would say are better than the best moments in the Soul Society. But my god! I don't mind when there are fights in a shonen anime. After all, that's kind of the bread and butter of the damn genre. But there comes a point in which the battles feel like they're just buying time for the main attraction to take place. It's the same problem that I had with the Tournament of Power, for example, or the Onigashima raid. I mean, yeah, sure, the battles may be cool, but do you wanna see Raizo fight? Or do you wanna see Luffy versus Kaido? Do you wanna see Zoro versus King, Sanji versus Queen, Big Mom versus Blob and Kid? What are One Piece names? Listen, I like the captains. I think that as characters they are very entertaining, but I gotta be honest, I could not be bothered to care for these fights. 1, because they just take too long, 2, they got repetitive, but 3, they just didn't affect the story at all. On my first reading, I just skimmed through them. Hell, I'm just gonna say, I skipped through half of these fights and nothing of value was lost to me. I wasn't confused, I wasn't lost. Some of these characters were hurt, some of these characters were not. I could have assumed that was going to happen either way. I mean, I guess the 1000-year Blood War kind of had the same issue, but I mean, 1, it's shorter. Not by much, I'm looking at the list. The Arrancar Arc started in chapter 183 and ended in chapter 423. In comparison, the 1000-year Blood War arc has been much faster paced than this arc, so it was much better, although I still find it to be a bit of an inconvenience, and if I found the 1000-year Blood War to be an inconvenience, imagine how anime-onlys must have felt watching the Arrancar Arc. I pray for them. That shit must have dragged through hell and back. Alright, a good example of an arc that has many battles. The the Alabasta arc, and the Dressrosa arcs in One Piece. The fights have purpose and move the plot forward, like the battle between Usopp, Robin, and the Doll Girl, the gladiator battles, the fight between the old lady, Nami, Brook, and Chopper. There's a lot of characters in One Piece, give me a break! Or the battle against a giant monster that was gonna destroy and cause infinite problems for them in Dressrosa if they didn't defeat him. To summarize, when the arc was actually focusing on the main important points, it was the best Bleach had to offer. But when the arc was having all the separate battles between the captains and the Espada, it just felt kind of pointless to me. The Arrancar arc isn't bad, but it certainly is my least favorite Bleach arc, just because I found the middle to be an absolute drag to read. I actually think that the Fullbringer arc is very good, which is apparently a weird opinion to have. I think that the way that the arc develops is interesting. It is a change of pace, and while in the grand scheme of things it feels like a transitioning point between this arc and the next arc, I do find it very enjoyable overall. The arc decides to spare me from the 70 fights per arc and instead decides to slow down. Give us a thriller as we see Ichigo in a situation in which he is way out of his depth. After the Arrancar arc, Ichigo loses all of his powers entirely. Now he can't even see ghosts, leaving the sidecast to handle most of the hollows in his absence. But Ichigo doesn't really like that he can't do anything. And throughout the arc, it's shown that he's going about his life with no goal and no motivation now that he can't defend people and ghosts. I've said it before and I'll say it again, I think that Ichigo has very interesting character development, and I think that the Fullbringer arc takes a lot of advantage of that. Another thing that the arc does well is the villains, which I found to be surprisingly good considering that Aizen was the man to overcome. Their plan and the way in which they execute it is really interesting, seeing how their power is slowly consuming everything around Ichigo's life and turning everything he knows against him, making for some insane moments in the arc. To put it simply, one of the villains is basically just one of those guys that photoshops himself in every photo, like, get him out of there! My one problem with the Fullbringer arc is that it kind of feels as though it was made purely to give Ichigo his powers back and allow the final arc to take place. Ichigo didn't really advance a lot as a character, he's just back to how he was before, and while you can argue that may have been the point of the arc since throughout the arc you can see how he devolved because of the loss of his powers, it only leads to the feeling that the arc is kind of inconsequential. The events that transpire do come back in some points of the 1000-year Blood War, but they feel more like small callbacks except for like one part, but it's like, I'll get to it. Overall, I would argue that the arc is pretty good. It's just that it doesn't feel all too important to the plot.
Okay, I was rereading the last couple of chapters and I changed my mind. They're actually super important. I may make somebody mad.
I think that the 1000-year Blood War was in contention for the best arc in Bleach, until they fumbled the absolute fuck out of it. From the very beginning of Bleach, they constantly established the rivalry and hatred that existed between the Quincy's and the Soul Reapers, yet it was never really relevant except for some moments with Uryu's family as they are all Quincy's, but now that rivalry is the central point of the new arc. Quincy's that were sealed for thousands of years free themselves and are looking for war. It's interesting to get to know more about the Quincy's, as after the first arc there wasn't really a lot of new lore revealed about them, and seeing them in action all throughout the arc is really fun as well. This entire arc was just fun. It had a lot of fun moments, and I would say that for a lot of the characters they had their best moments as well. Kenpachi's Bankai, Shunsui's Bankai, Yoruichi's God of Thunder.
You already know what time it is!
Yeah, sure, I also feel like Byakuya should have stayed 6 feet underground, but when he told Ichigo to protect the Mickey Mouse Clubhouse, that shit was still pretty cool. Well, this arc still has the issue from the Arrancar arc, in which there sometimes feels as though there's a bit too many fights. I do feel that because these have the most hype moments in the series, and also because there's not that many compared to the Arrancar arc, at least it doesn't feel that way because again, 250 chapters! For context, that is longer than OG Dragon Ball! This is also the best arc when it comes to Ichigo's development, as not only does he learn to accept the many parts of himself he didn't before, but we also get revelations that make the conflict feel more personal, like when it was revealed that Ichigo's mom was a Quincy, which was built up since the Arrancar arc when Aizen was giving Ichigo a talk about how him even being alive was probably part of his plan. That's why he's the GOAT! Throughout the entire arc, you are in the edge of your seat as the characters struggle against the Stern Readers. You jump out of your seat when they start getting the upper hand, and you're constantly shitting your pants as the stakes get higher and higher. Everything about this arc is the best that Bleach has to offer. So let me just ask real quick, what happened here? Yu-Ha is the main villain in the 1000-year Blood War, and I think that he does a very good job in being a menacing antagonist that properly sets the stakes. But there's a problem here, and that is that Kubo simply made him way too powerful. You could already tell that there was some bullshit happening when the Yuha that was fighting the strongest Soul Reaper was nothing more than a clone, and the real one easily one-shot Yamamoto after he used the strongest Bankai. And yeah, that made for a shocking moment, but I call bullshit because how do you have one of the strongest characters, how do you do them such a disservice and give him such a unwarranted, undignified death? Now, do I know anything about writing? No, but I think it would have been much better, personally, I'm speaking for myself here, if Yamamoto fought the real Yuha, which by this point was supposed to be extremely weakened, was he not? And have Yuha just barely manage to scoop the win, and by the time that Ichigo gets there, have another Stern Reader. Hell, just introduce the Uryu betrayal plot point earlier and have him fight Ichigo and win because of his recently gained powers. This still has Yuha come off as a menacing villain, as you know that he needs to regain his full power. It introduces Uryu's conflict into the story in case they didn't already, I can't really remember right now. And you still have Ichigo's Hanpakuto broken. But more than that, you don't have a massive power gap which would affect the story all the way until the very end. Because he's too powerful, no matter what Kubo did, the ending was gonna be seen or felt like a bit of an asspull. And that is exactly what happened. You know, you fucked up when Ichigo, Renji, and Aizen have to team up to beat the villain, and it still feels like they won through plot, because by the end of the series, Yuha has the power to alter the future, or choose the one that benefits him the most, so he literally knows everything that would happen no matter what the other characters do. Yuha lost because of an arrow that Uryu's dad just so happened to have, that we didn't know about until like basically the last 3 fucking chapters, and that arrow just cancels out the Almighty. By the way, can I mention that I think that the Almighty is one of the coolest titles you can get in fiction? Anyways, moving on. But at the same time, could I have foresaw that too? My head hurts! I think that they made Yuha too powerful, and without it, I think that the arc could have concluded in a great manner. But for now, I mean, the ending is cool, it's aight. I think the final fight was pretty cool, except for the fact that it felt rushed. I just wish that the anime can expand into this a little bit further. When I look back on Bleach, I obviously remember many of its pacing issues. Clearly the biggest issue with Bleach was the amount of fights that drew the pacing to a halt, that sometimes combining power-ups. I mean, Ichigo's just a fucking salad of every single different group in the entire fucking series, and the rush ending. But when I look again, I also see many memorable characters, funny moments, great, important fights, great character development, great plot twist, great story in general, beautiful and clean art. I mean, have you seen the manga panels? And the banger soundtrack from the anime, oh my god! When I look back on my experience with Bleach, I think of the unique style that set it apart from the other members of the big three, with the different fashion styles, simple art that made the characters stand out more, beautiful panels that are ingrained in my memory, and the banger soundtrack. When I look back on Bleach, I think of that banger sound. Okay, I think you get it right now. Bleach has its issues, but despite the many issues that it has, when I look back on it, I can only see a magnificent show.
Well, that's all the time that I've had for today. I hope y'all enjoyed the anime and that the anime doesn't really fuck up what the manga has done. I'm just a random stranger you met on the internet, but hey, just call me Sudo.